Is it working? Anybody hear me? You got it on back there now? Everybody hear me? Can you? Yes, no. Okay, thank you. I'm nervous enough up here already. Just tell me. No, I want to tell you, we went to England, of course, and there were about 13 of us that went. Larry actually got something up with the school at Mars Hill and the chorus, and so Madeline said something about, hey, I would like to go to England with them. And I thought, well, I would too. So we just decided we would go and go visit our missionary that we have both there in England and in Portugal. We don't get to go and visit them a lot, but it is amazing how much they desire our attention. They really, we communicate emails, letters, those type things, but they don't have a lot of interaction with other than the people they have at their church, and they're out trying to mission to others. And of course, you know, as well as anybody that's in the church, it's hard to go out and try to recruit somebody, as you would say, and bring them to Christ. So they really look forward to being there. And of course, with the big group showing up in England, they were excited, and they had the VBS all set up and ready to go, and had all the accommodations. And when you go, they're so excited about it, they're worried about making you happy. As you know, we're going there to try to encourage them, where they're more there to make sure we're happy. So it's a unique experience, and the first thing is greetings from the churches over there. There's 3 in London and 1 that we support. Stephen Ussell is Stockwell, but there's also Tooting and Lewisham that's there. And when you think of England, you think of English. Well, at those 3 congregations, they're mainly Nigerian, Jamaican, Dominican Republic. There's really not any English that are there in the church in London. It is so, we don't realize, unless you've been there and you've seen it, how new and young our country is. When you walk around those streets in London, the buildings are thousands of years old. And so those Catholics, Church of England, that's all those people have ever known. And you're born and you're taken into those big cathedrals and see those type things. And of course, they could just start with some slides. We may get to that in a minute. I'll start here. That is our missionary, Stephen, and his wife, Jasmine. They took us, we got to stay with them, Mal and I did. And there's a couple of boys that got to stay with, of course, there's a lot of different people, but I think the boys, Lucas and Gunnar, got to stay with one in a bachelor pad, had their own refrigerator and all that. So the rest of us, we got to, they were set up. Of course, we wouldn't have wanted to stay with them. We're a little older. But Stephen and Jasmine took us into their house, and she would cook us some breakfast, so we enjoyed that. But he does a great job. He's busy, and we laughed a lot. He was handing out broken cell phones, but somehow they all worked. He uses all of them constantly. Somebody's constantly calling him from the congregation, something going on. So he's a busy man, but they're great folks. Go to the next slide. I don't remember what I got. Okay, this gives you an example of there's better pictures of some inside of the churches and outside, but this one, the reason I show you this is you see the podium there and all the chairs behind it. Well, that's where Tooting worships. No, it's not their building, but that's where they worship. And if you go to the next slide, please, and that's behind. They're renting and using that building. That's about all that you take what you can get to worship in, because there's not any, you don't see the Baptist and Methodist and Church of Christ as you do here with the building. These are the kind of things you look. Go to the next slide, please. We went for a visit to some of the members of the congregation. And this is Zoe. This is, of course, Jeff and Judy know her real well, but she and Stephen, they fight like cats and dogs, but it's all fun. They're like best friends, but we had the best time. That is her son. He says he's atheist, but he knows better, but we're just having a hard time. I say we, I know Judy and Minnie have talked to him a lot. Super nice guy. He was glad to be there. He even hung around with us some. We had the whole big group there. But she's a wonderful Christian lady and has always been there and been very supportive of the church there. Next slide, please. I just wanted to show that one because that was a pretty group of folks, so I just thought I'd throw that one in there. That's Jasmine, and that's Julia, and that's just members. She's a member of the church there at Tooting. Stop. Go to the next one, please. Okay. Before we get there, we went to see a lady there. Her name was Babs. And they wanted to go and encourage her. She was an active member in the church, and so they didn't tell us everything about it till we got there. Well, she had dementia. She didn't know who we were or what we were there for, but her daughter brought her in there and we sang. And she sang some with us. But that's what she loved to do all the time. And so her daughter picked out the songs, and so we did that. Now, did that encourage her or did that encourage her daughter? Absolutely. Did it encourage us? Absolutely. But even better news out of that, her daughter now has become baptized since then. So we're proud to hear that. We go to Portugal now. I probably got a little more, and I'll tell you before we get to it. When I was there, and you'll see a picture, I actually did the class and the sermon. And I was telling Jeff about this already, and he said he's never had this happen to him in the Ukraine. But I was teaching the class, and Adelino, our missionary over there, looked at me and he said, and he pointed at his watch, and Peter was interpreting for me, and he said, "Hey, by the way, you need to watch the clock." So anyway, I was going a little over, so they were telling me I need to watch the clock. But anyway, go to slide number 1, please. It'll be funnier later. Okay, this gives you an idea about where Portugal is. Anybody see a country they recognize that we talk about every now and then? See how close it is to the Ukraine? And you think of Portugal being that small. I always think about Italy being a very small country. When you say Portugal, it's not very big, but it is. One thing I noticed about it is very clean in Porto. Can you go to the next slide, please? It's a clean city. And what is it you think of when you think of Portugal in football? Is there a player anybody knows about that plays there? All right, go to the next slide. You know who I'm talking about. Best soccer player, football player in the world, and so that's where he's from. This shows you some background on the city. Porto is on the ocean and on the river, but this right here is where, in those hills, is where they store wine and manufacture the wine, and they always have putting it on these boats. That's how they do it. Still, put them on those boats and take them out to the ocean to be shipped off. So that's kind of a neat area and if you thought of something that a country like that would have the 50% of the world's production, cork. What do you use cork for? Kind of fits in, doesn't it? But we were talking, and they were saying something about it. I said, well, y'all got all this wine, all this cork. I said, I guess you do a lot of fishing. And they said, yeah, but we use this in insulation and ship it all over the world. So it's just a neat there being in such a neat environment. Go to the next slide, please. This shows you the city. If you'll notice off in the background, there is some modern buildings. But this is where a lot of activity occurs for the city is around in here. And this is where Adelino is right around in here. And we'll talk about him in a minute. But just kind of get an idea of the environment. Go to the next slide, please. That's Porto. That's the river. And as you can see, there's not much room for car traffic. Go to the next slide, please. And there's McDonald's. Go to the next slide, please. They're very, it's a very pretty, it is an old country as well. again, we don't realize how young we are, but that shows you that is a train station, and that all around that. Go to the next slide. I don't know if it still shows some more. Anyway, on that back on that slide, that is all the way around painted in there on that top stone. Thank you. All the way around, and it gives the history of the country all the way around. And they're very proud, but yet if you'll notice, very clean. And it's not a third world country, but it's not the United States either, as you could tell with all the houses. But they're very proud, very clean, and very cordial people. Go to the next slide, please. This kind of gives you an idea of downtown. It's not New York City or London, but it during certain times it's pretty busy. And they have a festival through here during certain times of the year, and it gets pretty congested. Go to the next slide, please. This kind of shows you, and of course, I didn't realize when they blew this up it's going to have cigarette butts on it, but that's their sidewalks in many places. That's what you're walking on, and that's where they're. So they've got designs in everything they do. And go to the next slide. This is what we were talking about before about old buildings and the children, adults growing up in. This is the kind of thing they're used to. So they're going to follow. Go to the next slide, please. Oh, go on to the next slide. I'm having that shit. Go ahead. Okay. This is a cuisine. I put them in the wrong place, but anyway, we'll go to the next slide. Anybody know what that is? What is it? Octopus? Yeah. Somebody ate that while we were there. Go to the next slide, please. Okay. We'll just cover some of the area, I guess. But this is, anybody recognize that? Kids over there don't. Go to the next slide. I have no idea what that is. Go to the next slide, please. Keep going. This is just some neat things they still do. I wanted to show you, give you an idea. This is, especially for the kids, I just was walking through, and I was with Peter, or Pedro, that's Adelino's son, and we walked through, and I see a lot of pictures Jeff puts up, and you think about those kids. Well, that's what our missionaries are after. You know, we're wanting to save those souls. And that was just a group of kids. They were happy, and they stopped, and they're like, if you can notice, one of them's like, why does he want to take my picture? But that's what our goal is, and that's why we have missionaries. Go to the next slide, please. And that's the reason we're there. And he said unto them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, here we go. This is Adelino is in the back, and I hope you are going by the right numbers up there. Adelino's in the back with the glasses, and then that's his wife Alice on the front. And then that's all of his children and grandchildren, or all of them. But that's his daughter-in-law in the middle, and Peter is standing up on the back. Now, Peter and his children are wanting to come to the U.S. really bad. He can speak English. He was my interpreter. So I'm trying to get him to come over here. So we went ahead. I think what happened, what caused them to want to come to Alabama is that we took some Alabama T-shirts over there to him, so that if anybody were through and they recognized him wearing that, they would know we're all over the world. But I want to kind of go over the history of the work with them. Adelino, go to the next slide. I forget what we got. And that's Adelino back on the left, his wife in the middle with the red hair. But and I guess it's arguable since I don't have the little booklet we have, but early 80s, he was an executive at Bayer and Bayer Aspirin. So in Portugal, and so he made a lot of money and was in a affluent position, and he decided that he was going to be a missionary and full time. So he took that leap, and that's what he's done, and he's done that work for us over there this entire time. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, next slide. This is what I was getting at as far as kids. They're taken into these places, and that's fascinating. I mean, that's fascinating. You see that, and that's not why you go to church, is to see those type things, but that's the nature of Catholicism and the things that statues and ornate things everywhere, and it's amazing when you're there what you see. Go to the next slide, please. That's old. Go to the next slide. It's those type things you just now you see, and this is how proud the Catholics are in some. And I say proud, I mean that in is they have strict and they take care of their own to some degree. Look at, you see what that is on the floor of that cathedral? You know what that is? Graves. That's where they put their priest. They buried their priest in those. Go to the next slide, please. And does anybody know what that is? It's kind of like a monastery. That's where, when a priest retires, so to speak, that's where they're put and taken care of by the Catholic Church. Go to the next slide, please. And the next one, I've got a lot of those pictures. Just, it's amazing. That just kind of shows you the town. I was just fascinated. It just wasn't, everybody was just very nice. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is an example of going in one of the cathedrals. This is in the basement. They've got several of their priests and bishops and things like that. They've got inside graves or whatever you want to call it, but that's the floor. And they have not disturbed that. You see what's in the bottom? That's where graves used to be, and now it's the skulls left over. But if you walk down there inside there, that's what's under you. So they don't disturb anything. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is where they worship. This is the Church of Christ in Porto. This is where Adelino and Alice. Okay, go to the next slide, please. And the next one. Okay, and this is the street they're on. So they're not worshiping in a nice facility with a nice parking lot. And actually, this is a Sunday morning, so it's not too bad. We actually stayed close to here, so this is really slow. Next slide, please. Now, I didn't put any of the scriptures up there, just the numbers, but that's one thing that, and a lot of the people in Porto do it, but especially at the church in Porto. Greet each other with a holy kiss. You didn't go and speak or hug anyone without them giving you a kiss. That just meant hello, like we'll shake hands, or but it's a holy kiss. Now, I know Jeff's talked about that, all the lovey-dovey hugging and all that. So they don't do all that, but they do they greet with a kiss, and it just means they care about you and they love you and they're glad to see you. And that's one of those cultural things. But go to the next slide, please. Notice I'm looking at my watch because somebody said something to me. Go to the next slide. Now, why does Peter think that's so funny? He's ready to wrap it up. But that's Adelino's son. He's very fluent in English and very smart. Very smart. And he's close to his dad, and he helps him as much as he can. They're very active members in the church. Go to the next slide, please. That's one thing about them as well. They love to sing. We all love to sing, but in England, one of the things they like to do that we like to do is eat. We went, and they make it an all-day affair. When we worshipped on Sunday at Tooting, we worshipped and we did Larry did a great job doing the sermon, and we went to eat afterwards. Nobody was in a hurry to get the food ready. Nobody was, everything was going fine. And then, they said, okay, the food's ready. We started eating about 12:30. We left the church building about 4. So we never stopped eating. That was nonstop. So, but at Porto, they love to sing. And you see those verses. But if you'll go to the next slide. They're just a joyous people. They're glad to be there. They're happy in worship. And Madeleine's back there, I think, trying to sing. And I look like my mouth's moving, but it's I meant to take a picture of a songbook for you. And I've said something. Madeline was quick to point this out. I said, well, Portuguese is a lot like Spanish speaking. Madeline said, Dad, I cannot teach you Portuguese through my Spanish. It's not the same. And so they would always tell me, I don't know Spanish either, but I would try to say some Spanish word, like casa or something like that, and it didn't mean anything. But anyway, go to the next slide, please. This is the congregation, and you'll see kind of the mix that are there. Just trying to find everybody in there. They do have 3 elders, 4 with Adelino, and they were excited. Somebody got away, and they tried to chase him down the street, wanting him to get in the picture. I don't know who it was, but that's the congregation. And we had a big time. Like I said, I did the sermon class. Madeline did the class for the small ones downstairs, and I didn't think we were going to be able to get her away from all the kids. Next slide, please. This, I don't know if you remember Robert and Rosa Reed. Robert was the one with CP, and he was here and spoke. Well, 10 years ago, Bill Tankersley and I went over there to Portugal. Went to London and Portugal, and that was the first time I'd been. And we were there worshiping, and they were there. First time I've ever met them. They came back home, and I got a call from my brother. It's probably been about 6 years ago now, and he said, do you know Robert and Rosa Reed? And I said, yeah, that sounds real familiar. And he was in Texas, and that's where he does a prison ministry, as he's talked to y'all. And he said, he told me he remembered me. Of course, I didn't remember him, but we had, he knew it from Kirk, and Kirk was telling him about it. But that he was in Texas, and he had met up with my brother in the service, and so we've been friends since then and been in communication. But that is his wife in the black, and that is her nephew. And her nephew has just recently been baptized. And so that was a joyous occasion for them, and they were quick to let me know that. Next slide, please. Now, the girl on the left, she's been baptized since we left. So they've had some baptisms, and I know that's a great encouragement to them. Go to the next slide. I don't know if I put it up yet. That's it. There's one, they've got a new gentleman that has started visiting somewhere, is in his 20s, and they're very excited. As you can see, it's very small. But if they can get those type of age, there's some older ones there, but they've got a good core there of, like we've talked about here, we've got some fires that have been built by a lot of people before us. And there's fires there, it's just it needs some of those age groups to come in and help build that fire. That's the struggle with any of the mission work. But please keep them in your prayers, and they have said more than once, be sure and thank the congregation for letting y'all come. And I said, well, we will, that's for sure. But I think we probably enjoyed visiting over there more than they enjoy visiting over here. But it was great, and I appreciate everybody for allowing us to go, and the elders. And I'm going to wrap it up. I'm seeing if I was leaving Larry any time.